create a climate in Canada where people are allowed to experiment and where people are allowed to vision and where people are allowed to dream, and then to give them the opportunities to implement their dreams.
Hello and welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Ming Wong.
And I'm Bill McQueen. Last week, organizations representing people with disabilities from across Canada met in Ottawa. They were there to discuss the impact of the federal Social Security review and to develop strategy. We have a report on some of the key issues later in the show.
We'll also drop in on a performance of Kids on the Block, a puppet show that introduces kids to disability. And for those of you who are going through baseball withdrawal, we have an item for you later in the show. The season would have ended with World Series celebrations this week if the players hadn't been on strike.
First, here's this week's Disability News highlights. When Heather Whitestone, who is hard of hearing, was recently crowned Miss America, a number of advocates heralded her accomplishment. But many people who are deaf feel it's turning out to be a hollow victory. Whitestone encourages the use of spoken English. Supporters of the use of American Sign Language, or ASL, don't think that she represents a positive role model. Darcy Poland has more.
Walk into Mr. Potter's math class, and the only sound is chalk racing across the blackboard. It's a quiet class, but there's plenty of talking going on. Here at the Minnesota State Academy for the Deaf, teachers and students speak and learn with their hands. This separates them from Heather Whitestone, the deaf pageant winner who prefers lip reading and spoken English.
Heather said that she had learned 6 years it took her to pronounce her name right. You know, in signing you could learn in a day. I can sign, but 6 years to learn to pronounce my name, it's a waste of time for me.
Whitestone's on record in Time magazine saying sign language limits the dreams of deaf children and will hinder their chances of success. That kind of talk angers the students at MSAD. Their school operates under a philosophy called Bi-Bi, bilingual and bicultural. But the first language, the most important one, is ASL, American Sign Language.
I never saw her signing. Signing ASL represents deaf culture. She really represents more a hearing culture because even though she's deaf, the small D-E-A-F, it's not a capital D-E-A-F.
Deaf culture with a capital D is a blend of pride, independence, and devotion to American Sign Language.
We want her to be part of the movement that says deaf people can sign, that it's good for us, that we can do that they're missing a link if they don't sign.
The students at the Academy thrive in an environment where their deafness is not a disability. They wish Miss America shared the view that it's okay not to speak as long as you can sign. For CBS News, I'm Darcy Polland.
At one time, it was thought that television would replace newspapers as a daily source of information. But now the same signals that bring you your favorite TV shows are also being used to send out electronic copies of newspapers. As Terry Matty discovered, this technology is a useful resource for people who are blind.
Ed Fooey of Ottawa has been without sight since he was an infant. He relies on his guide dog, Sina, to help him get around. To get detailed news, Fooey used to rely on friends to read him newspaper articles. But not anymore. Fooey now has access to the Globe and Mail the same day it's published. With a voice synthesizer connected to his computer, Fooey can browse through the Globe. By speeding up the rate of the synthesizer, he can quickly scan the financial sections. As an economist, he finds the service indispensable.
In my business as a consultant, it's important for me to have sources of financial and economic data.
Fooey is one of 24 visually impaired Canadians who receive the Globe electronically. The pilot project was set up by the Canadian National Institute for the Blind and the federal government. Instead of sending the Globe over telephone lines, it's done a much cheaper way. It's beamed to subscribers on a television signal. Here's how it works. You've likely seen a black stripe flickering across your TV screen when your vertical hold is out of whack. Well, that stripe can transmit reams of coded information. The black stripe is part of every TV signal. It's called the vertical blanking interval, or VBI. The Globe is broadcast on VBI every morning at 6 o'clock. The transmission takes about 30 minutes. The paper is then stored in the subscribers' computers. To get the signal, you need a decoder and a computer to store the information. Lawrence Utenheier is also on the pilot project for the visually impaired. He enjoys receiving the globe every day. But he says the cost of buying a $700 decoder is too high for him. And on top of that, there's a $300 annual subscription fee for the electronic globe.
Let me put it to you this way. Would you pay $1,000 to read the Globe Mail for a year? I mean, it's a lot of money.
I believe that it's something that demand will rectify, hopefully. In other words, the stronger the demand for this type of information, the lower the price will become.
Statistics Canada has released new figures on students who graduated from universities and colleges 3 years ago. According to the study, graduates with disabilities experienced an unemployment rate 50% higher than other classmates. People with disabilities who did find a job made slightly less money. People with Tourette syndrome frequently experience involuntary verbal and physical outbursts. This hasn't stopped BC doctor Morton Dorin from performing surgery. Now he's also enlightening students about this puzzling and often misunderstood disability. Juanita Peters has the story.
And this is something that we were born with. We can't help, but we can overcome and get on and do just about anything we want to do.
And he is the living proof of it. Dr. Doran has been a practicing surgeon for almost 20 years, despite his incredibly noticeable jerking motions. He has them when he drives, when he flies his plane, but never when a patient is on the operating table. He's never made a mistake, but we asked if any potential patients have ever refused his services.
Now, I know that in my practice over the years, many of the GPs, many of the family physicians will have pre-told or pre-warned their patients and before they come to me and say, well, you know, don't worry about this guy. He's going to tap and he's going to be twitching and this and that. Don't worry, it's okay. You know, this doesn't happen during surgery.
Janet Smith, who represents the St. John chapter of the Tourette Foundation, has a 13-year-old son with it.
When he was younger, it was very hard to go in public because of his actions. It's not acceptable to have a child going through a mall snorting at people.
She says another student who misunderstood her son's responses beat him up once. But now, more and more are hearing about Tourette's, and that's comforting to those who experience it.
What's the hardest part of having this?
People not understanding. People thinking you're weird and stuff like that.
Joel says seminars like this one by Dr. Doran are inspiring and encouraging to him.
I realized what he has to go through. I thought I had it bad, but he has it much worse than me.
Tourette syndrome is an inherited disorder. There are more than 20 diagnosed cases in the city of St. John. Juanita Peters, CBC News, St. George.
That's this week's Disability News Highlights.
When we come back, an update on Social Security reform.
People with disabilities are actively planning their response to the latest part of the federal Social Security review. They're responding to Lloyd Axworthy's discussion paper and putting forward their own ideas. The paper focuses on how changes to existing Social Security, jobs, education, and training might be undertaken. Axworthy hopes that these changes will improve opportunity and access to jobs. People with disabilities are mentioned throughout the document and in a follow-up discussion paper that was released last Friday. The consultation process could help create a more responsive set of programs for people with disabilities, ones which create more independence. But the discussions are taking place in a short time frame and against the backdrop of calls for deep cuts by the finance minister.
Exist, but we have a vision of empowerment and the philosophy of independent living.
People with disabilities have been waiting a long time for changes that would truly make them more independent and able to join the active workforce.
Who approves whether I need this chair or that crutch or...
Last week, leaders of the independent living centers, the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, and others met together and separately in Ottawa. They examined the Axworthy documents and found them in many respects vague about specific programs. Programs which people with disabilities need to go to work, such as attendant care, accessible transportation and workplaces. They also work to create concrete strategies to secure these kinds of programs in any future reform. Michael Huck is a member of the Employment Committee of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities.
We need to look at how the programs are designed and how they're delivered. We've said that for a long time. We've said that we felt that they were inefficient, that they needed change.
To bring forth their own creativity, their own responsibility, their own risk-taking.
Al Simpson is Executive Director of the Independent Living Resource Center of Winnipeg.
The need here is for a new legislation, a new program that allows people the insurance safety network without the penalties and the disincentives that currently exist.
Tracy Walters is Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Independent Living Centers.
We have to create a new system that does not foster dependency. I mean, there's a lot of in the medical and rehabilitation industry, it's a big industry. Disability is a big industry. And things are going to have to change somewhat. I mean, there's just, the system is oppressive. And the government recognizes that. And that's very encouraging to us.
In a way, this is our opportunity to put forward what we believe are new systems or new ways of empowering people to be involved in the labor market or in the community at large. We're concerned about those deficit reduction issues. We also, though, see possibly an opportunity to maybe revitalize the programs to ensure that they take into account principles like integration, the cost of disability, self-determination of persons with disability in the community and in the labor market.
You know, how would this be implemented and promoted in the Canadian context that will empower people?
Henry Enns is the Executive Director of Disabled Peoples International.
If the process is driven by new creativity, it is quite possible that the end result will be that an overall Canadian society will be better off than they are at the present time, because when you empower disabled people and when you enable them to develop their skills by creating employment opportunities, by developing new models of entrepreneurship, you know, you take somebody off of disability pension, off a model that continues to keep them dependent, you create the opportunity for them to be independent, to have jobs. Not only do they, take away the drain of additional present resources, but they start contributing by paying taxes. And the end result is that you probably will be saving some money.
One of the tests of this reform for us is, are persons with disabilities going to lose anything? Or is their position going to be deteriorating? That's where we're going to start from.
We've got a long way to go yet to develop those mechanisms and to determine whether it's a federal jurisdiction or a provincial jurisdiction. Yes, in the Constitution it is provincial, but really it's the federal tax-paying capacity that's the backbone of these kind of programs across Canada in order to make sure they're uniform across this country or have some at least equity and equality across this country.
We would be very disposed to changes in the system, voc rehab system, that empowered people to make choices, to be able to identify their own training needs and their dignity of risk as well.
Al Simpson and Mary Reid of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities discussed the importance of people with disabilities taking part.
The other thing that's really exciting for me is to see people with disabilities develop their own expertise, if not professionalism. And while in our movement we don't use the word professionalism very comfortably, because for us historically it's meant domination. But disabled people now are becoming truly the professionals and are being recognized by society, recognized in the Acts Release paper as being the true experts who should be consulted. And that's an exciting time. But I challenge you and the conservative movement, will they rise to the occasion and will they get past the blame and into the constructive new solutions?
And with information, certainly people will.
Information that we can all have to dig for and create. It can't be handed on a platter, because right now the proposals are very general, very theoretical, and the grassroots membership are going to have to put them into concrete terms.
Yes, and I think our role is taking that information and putting it in some, number one, straightforward language, and secondly, provide some possible impacts of what the reform could mean, but also to ask some questions so that people have a tool to use in their own communities to ask questions of each other.
Are people going to leave that safety net that looked after them for the rough road of the marketplace?
People who want to choose to do so are going to do it. People have the strength, people have the energy, and people have the skills and the know-how in terms of how to do
What gives you that confidence? What gives you that optimism?
Because I believe in people.
Good, so do I.
There are other pieces of the social policy puzzle ahead which people with disabilities have to watch out for: health care reform and the provincial reaction to scarce government dollars. Meanwhile, the Standing Committee on Human Resources will begin crossing the country soon. They'll be gathering opinions from both individuals and organizations. If you'd like to know when they're coming to your area, contact us. Our address is coming up at the end of the program, and we'll keep you posted in the weeks ahead.
When we come back, kids and kids on the block. People with disabilities often run up against stereotypical ideas about what they can and cannot do. Education is important in changing these ideas. A group of puppets called Kids on the Block are teaching kids and some adults that being disabled just means being different. We caught up with them during one of their performances in Winnipeg.
Hi! How you doing? You're very quiet this morning. I'm Mark Riley, and I'm out here because she's in there.
Originally, the Kids on the Block were created by a special education teacher named Barbara Aiello in the United States, and it really was her brainchild. She had a vision that children with disabilities could learn in a fun and non-threatening way about people with disabilities, and they could learn factual information and dispel a lot of the myths that are created about people with disabilities.
Hey, Mark, are you, a little bit, sick or something?
Oh, no! I'm not sick. I have cerebral palsy.
You got what?
I have CP.
Essentially, the children are learning to accept differences in others, which is something that can be taken far beyond the borders of disability. It can be taken into, racism and other issues, just accepting anyone who's different. They also learn factual information about specific disabilities. Our program conducts presentations not only on CP, like me, but also does presentations on learning disabilities, emotional disturbances, Down syndrome, mental disabilities, and blindness. There's a wide variety of topic areas that can be explored.
You know what? I've got a question for you guys. Has any of you ever been teased before? Yeah? When kids tease me behind my back and they make fun of me, that bugs me. But I try to do the best I can, and I think about the things I can do, not about the things I can't do.
The information that they're learning, they would never learn from an adult telling them in the same way.
Okay, you there.
How do you get into your bed?
The puppets are non-threatening. The children, they respond to the puppets, and then they feel comfortable enough to go on and ask a person with a disability, a consumer, a real living person, maybe some of the same kinds of questions that they would have for the puppets.
And my bed is, I wheel up to my bed, so it's here,
I learned that they're
just all the same. They're just plain normal people, just with a disability.
Here we go. Okay, Sydney, you know what? I have a friend named Ellen Jane, and you know what? She's got Down syndrome. And she works as a vet. Do you guys see that big guy over there with the camera? He's from a really neat show called D-Net. D-Net? Yeah, it's on TV. It's a show about disabilities. I was kind of wondering, Mel, if maybe they need a new host for their show. Like, I could do it? Oh, yeah.
It looks to me like they should stick to entertainment, Bill.
They'd make a great contribution to the show, but you know, I think they'd fit in better over at the Air Farce. When we come back, a hit with the team.
It's been just over 1 year since Joe Carter belted that classic home run, the one that made the Blue Jays World Series champs for the second year in a row. This year, there's been a lot of disappointment and frustration over the cancellation of the baseball season. Here's a reminder of what the game's about. Marcus Schola reports on one player's enthusiasm for the game.
12-year-old Lebanon Little Leaguer is hearing impaired.
He sees the clapping going on. We give him thumbs up, high fives. He feels the excitement. If he can't hear it, he feels it.
It's a first for Lebanon Little League. There's never been a player with a hearing problem before, so you can well imagine some of the difficulties. An obvious one, how the coach communicates. Simple stuff like getting Carl to move closer to the second base bag becomes rather animated.
He focuses really well on the game, and when he's into it, he doesn't like us to give him directions. So he works pretty hard at that.
That's Carl's mom, Jane, at every practice, at every game. Because of her ability to sign, Jane has become an important part of Carl's Little League experience. In fact, it just wouldn't happen without her.
This is the first sport that he's really shown a lot of interest in. And when he wanted to sign up for it, I knew it was going to be a responsibility. So we just decided together that he really wanted to do it, and I would back him all the way.
Because of Carl's hearing problem, you might expect some kidding from the other boys, but not on this team.
They treat him like they do all the other kids. They cheer him on and give him thumbs up and tell him he's done a good job. So I think it's been wonderful.
Carl Hill's favorite player is Mo Vaughn of the Boston Red Sox. And that's us this week. I'm Ming Wong.
And I'm Bill McQueen. Now here's our address.
Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W1E6. You can fax us at 416-205-3399.